Hello, I'm very happy that today we have a chance to sit together, not in a big hall, not in the middle of applause, but right here in this quiet moment when you choose to give time to yourself. Time, something most of us only realize the value of when it has slipped away for too long. You know, there was a period in my life when every morning felt so identical that it was frightening. I worked hard, I tried to live well, but I kept falling behind year after year. I thought I was unlucky. I thought I was born in the wrong place. But then something woke me up, and it wasn't glamorous at all. It was the moment I saw myself lying to a little girl to hide the fact that I didn't even have $2 in my pocket. I froze, not because of the lack of money, but because I saw who I had become. From that moment, I understood one thing. Life doesn't change by magic. It changes when we change. And to truly change, you need principles, not pretty advice, but principles that know how to reshape you from the roots. There are 12 principles that transform my entire journey. One of them will open new doors for you. But the final principle, the one I'll save until the end of the video, is the thing that turned the ship of my life around by 180 degrees. If I had known it sooner, I wouldn't have lost so many years. And before we begin, let's gently touch one question. Is there something in your life that needs to be redirected right now? Hold on to that question. We'll need it for the journey ahead. Principle 1, your philosophy determines your direction. I want to tell you a very old memory, one that I only understood much later how important it was. It was an afternoon when I stood outside my parents' house in Idaho. The air was so cold, my breath turned into smoke. I looked out at the field in the distance and suddenly felt like the last leaf of the season, trying to cling to a branch that no longer had life. I didn't lack effort. I lacked direction. When I met my mentor, he didn't ask what talents I had or how much money I wanted to earn. He only asked, "Jim, what is your life philosophy?" I stood there, embarrassed. I had never truly answered that question. And he continued with a sentence that kept me silent for days. You're not poor because you lack money. You're poor because you lack philosophy. You see, a life philosophy is like the compass in a sailor's hand. The wind may change direction. The waves may rise and fall. But the one holding the right compass will always find the way. Those without a compass just drift, hoping good things will happen. Back then, I thought life was determined by markets, by the economy, by luck. But the more I lived, the more I saw. Your philosophy determines 90% of your direction. Because philosophy creates choices, choices create actions, and actions create your future. Look back for a moment. Some people get the same opportunities you do, but they go farther. Some people face the same difficulties you do, but they don't collapse. Some people start later than you, but they surpass you. The reason isn't fate. The reason is how they interpret everything. A life philosophy isn't a collection of nice quotes. It's how you explain the world. It's what you believe about money, about yourself, about effort, about time. It's like the foundation of a house. You don't see it, but everything stands on it. The image I want you to keep. Your life is a sail, but your philosophy is the hand on the rudder. The size of the sail doesn't matter as much as how it's steered. So the most important question of this principle is, what philosophy is silently leading you each day toward the future or toward the old place you want to leave? If you dare to change the way you think, I promise you'll see everything else change with it. And then, once your philosophy starts to become clear, there's a second thing that determines the speed you go. Something most people overlook. Principle 2, become the person who deserves it. There's one evening I remember vividly. I had just finished my shift, covered in dust and sweat, and walked into our small living room. My wife was sitting at the dining table, the warm yellow light falling on her tired face that she tried to hide. In that moment, I suddenly realized something. We weren't poor because we lacked money, but because I wasn't yet the kind of person who could create more. I still worked hard, but hard work doesn't turn into results on its own. I still wanted a better life, but wanting doesn't become reality on its own. My mentor once said, Jim, don't chase success. Become the person success wants to chase. I sat for a long time that night looking into myself. I wanted more, but I hadn't become the version of myself deserving of more. Do you recognize this? Opportunities only come to people who have enough capacity to hold them. Money only stays with those disciplined enough to protect it. Love lasts only with those deep enough to nurture it. You can't expect an orange tree to bear fruit when its roots have never grown strong from within. I remember a time when I tried to demand life to give me more, but I wasn't valuable enough to receive more. Have you ever been like me? Wanting a higher salary but not improving your skills? Wanting opportunities but not upgrading yourself? Wanting freedom while carrying habits that keep you trapped? Remember this image. Life is like a heavy door. You cannot push it open with desires. You can only open it with force, and force comes from who you become. And when I began to change myself little by little, the first thing that came wasn't money. It wasn't opportunity. It was self-respect. Self-respect comes when you do something you used to avoid. Self-respect comes when you finish a small promise you made to yourself. Self-respect comes when you can look in the mirror and say, today I am better than yesterday. The action question of this principle: if life gave you exactly what you deserve, what would you deserve today? And here is the core line I want you to remember for a long time. You don't get paid for what you want. You get paid for what you become. When you begin to become the person who deserves it, skills are what push you forward faster. Principle 3, the profits of thinking. One morning I sat in the small kitchen of my home in Idaho with a cup of cold coffee in front of me. I looked at the notebook my mentor insisted I carry everywhere, and on the very first page he wrote me a sentence. Jim, your income rarely exceeds your thinking. Quote. I didn't understand that for years, because I used to think money came from luck, from markets, from the right timing. But the more I lived, the more I saw. Thinking is what creates profit. Back then, I worked harder than most people but still stayed stuck, because I had only one mindset: work enough to survive. I never dared to think I could do better. I never believed I could become someone worth being paid more. Until one day, a truth hit me. People don't get paid for the hours they work. They get paid for the value their thinking brings to the marketplace. Look around. Two people sell the same product. One only thinks about closing. The other thinks about delivering value. They get different results. Two managers, one thinks about finishing tasks. The other thinks about developing people. Their incomes are worlds apart. Two people start from zero. One thinks this is too hard. The other thinks, what can I learn from this? 3 years later, they live in two different universes. My mentor once gave me an image I'll never forget. Thinking is like the glass. Income is the water. A small glass can only hold a small amount of water. You can't demand life to fill a big cup when inside you still hold a tiny one. For years, I was limited by myself, by how I saw my abilities, by how I valued myself. It wasn't the market rejecting me. I rejected myself first. Have you ever been like that? Have you ever felt you deserved more, but kept thinking like someone who deserved less? Have you ever feared setting big goals because, what if I can't do it? The action question of this principle is, which mindset of yours is keeping your income at the same level? Remember this core line. When thinking changes, income has no choice but to change. Quoting. And then, once your thinking expands, you need one more very important factor to go far, something most people fear facing but cannot live without. Principle 4, opportunity always hides in danger. There was a period of my life I'll never forget. Those were the long winter days in Idaho. The wind blew so hard that its whistling slipped through the door cracks and cut into the heart of a tired man. That day, I received the news that my work hours were being cut. Rent still had to be paid. The kids still needed care. And I felt the future slipping away from me faster than the winds outside. I sat by an old wooden table, staring at the only oil lamp in the house. Its flickering yellow light was as small as my confidence at the time. I looked at it and kept asking myself, why does life keep pushing me into dead ends like this? I used to think hardship came to punish me, and that people like me were born without luck. But then something my mentor once said hit me right in the chest. Jim, hardship doesn't come to kill you. It comes to see whether you deserve the opportunity behind it. I stayed silent for a long time. I realized that for years, whenever I faced obstacles, all I did was complain and avoid them. I thought the door had closed, but I had never asked myself whether behind that wall was a bigger door waiting. Maybe I simply wasn't strong enough to open it yet. Looking back, I saw that the most important turning points in my life all began in darkness. I was so broke I didn't have $2 to buy a little scout girl a cookie. That very moment woke me up. I fell into despair and then met the mentor who changed my life. I was stuck in a dead-end job and was forced to learn the skills that led me to financial freedom. Hardship wasn't punishment. It was a test to see whether I was ready to become a better version of myself. I remember the farmers I used to work with. They told me something very simple but incredibly true. A seed only sprouts when it endures enough pressure from the dark soil above it. Without darkness, the sprout would never be strong. Without pressure, the roots would never grow deep. And without freezing days, spring would never be something worth longing for. Opportunity and danger always travel together. Fear one, and you lose both. I once worked with a friend named Harold, a skilled tractor mechanic. One year he lost his biggest client. I thought he would fall apart. But no, he said, if I don't push myself forward, nothing will ever change. He used that empty stretch of time to learn how to repair a new kind of machine that had just come out. 2 years later, he became the only person in the entire region who could fix it. People drove for hours just to find him. And Harold simply smiled. If I hadn't run into trouble that year, I'd have never pushed myself to learn. You see, adversity doesn't take opportunities away from us. It only removes the old version of us to prepare us for something better. The difference between those who rise and those who collapse isn't ability. It isn't luck. It's how they face hardships. People lose opportunities not because they're not talented, but because they quit too early, right when things start getting difficult. There's an image I really like. The eagle doesn't soar high because it avoids strong winds. It soars because of the strong winds. Ordinary people avoid the wind. Mature people learn to use it. Danger is just headwind. But if you know how to adjust your sail, it becomes momentum. So ask yourself, right now, is there a recent hardship that made you want to quit? And have you asked yourself, what is this trying to teach me? Because sometimes what you call danger is exactly the way life hands you a new opportunity. Remember the core line of this principle. Hardship doesn't stop you from going far. It only stops your old self from going any farther. And once you understand this, you'll realize the most important thing isn't which way the wind blows, but how you adjust your sail. Principle 5, the angle of your sail determines your life. I used to think my life revolved around what happened to me. When the wind was favorable, everything felt easy. When the wind was against me, I thought life was fighting me. I blamed circumstances. I blamed the market. I blamed luck. I blamed my poor past. But I never looked at the one thing that mattered most, the sail I was holding. I remember one afternoon I was sitting by a small lake near my parents' home. The weather was a bit chilly, the water rippling softly. There was an old man rowing a wooden boat. The wind that day was strong. I thought he would turn back to shore, but no. He stood up and calmly adjusted the rope holding the sail. Just one small adjustment, and the boat changed direction. It was no longer pushed by the wind, it moved forward because of it. I watched him for a long time. I realized people can't choose the wind, but they can choose the direction of their sail. My mentor once told me something I carried all my life. Jim, the wind blows the same for all of us. But successful people are the ones who know how to adjust their sail. It kept me quiet for days. All through my youth, I thought others were luckier, more talented, born in better places. But the truth was, they simply adjusted better. When I faced hardship, all I did was endure. They, on the other hand, repositioned themselves. Same wind, two completely different destinations. I remember when I was 25, I fell into the worst phase of my life. Low income, many worries. I felt like the winds of life were swallowing me. But when I met my mentor, he said, the wind only reveals how your sail is set. If the sail is right, the stronger the wind, the better. If the sail is wrong, even a gentle breeze becomes an obstacle. I sat and reflected on my life, and I understood something painful but true. I wasn't steering my life. I was letting the wind do it for me. The day I adjusted my first sail, meaning I changed my perspective, everything shifted. I stopped asking, why is this happening to me? I started asking, what can I do with what's happening? That was the moment the story changed. In Idaho, I saw many farmers face drought seasons, dry winds, scorching skies, cracked soil. Some complained, but others quietly adjusted how they watered, how they sprouted seeds, how they chose planting days. Same drought, completely different harvests, not because they were stronger, but because they adjusted. The sail of a person's life is their mindset, their reactions, their attitude, their way of interpreting problems. People with the right sail usually share 3 traits. They don't avoid reality. They don't blame. They don't wait for favorable winds. They understand that waves aren't there to block the way, but to teach them balance. Once I asked an old sailor what the hardest part of going to sea was. I thought he would say storms, but he said, the hardest part isn't the storm. It's keeping the sail from drifting when the wind starts picking up. It's precisely when things start changing that people lose direction most easily. The sail slips not in storms, but when the wind first grows stronger. The question I want you to keep in your heart is, am I adjusting my sail according to circumstances, emotions, or my own goals? My mentor also said, if you don't adjust, you will always drift back to where you were, whether you want to or not. Life doesn't pause to wait for you. The wind keeps blowing, the waves keep moving. Only you choose your direction. The core line of this principle: no one can change the wind, but everyone can change the sail. And when you finally understand how to steer your life, you step into a deeper law, a law nature has been teaching us for thousands of years. Principle 6, sow, care, wait, harvest. The law of seasons shapes every success. From a young age, I always saw my life as a dry field. I'd sow a few seeds and wait for results the next day. When nothing happened, I got disappointed. I changed seeds. I changed land. I changed methods. I changed everything except myself. And then one year, I worked with an old farmer in Idaho. He didn't talk much and lived slowly, and I often helped him during the planting season. One day, as I stood looking over the long rows of soil, I blurted out, "When will it grow?" He didn't answer right away. He leaned on his hoe, looked out across the field, and said one sentence I remembered forever. "Jim, each season has its own job." I stood there confused. But he continued, "Sowing isn't the time for harvesting. Waiting isn't the time for blaming. Caring isn't the time for complaining. And harvesting isn't the time for boasting. Each thing has its season. Each season has its rhythm." That sentence later saved me from countless moments of quitting. Today, I see many young people just like I used to be. They want to sow today and harvest tonight. They want muscles after 3 workouts. They want to master English in 2 weeks. They want to be rich after 3 months of effort, and when results don't show up immediately, they think they failed. But the truth is, no one harvests anything without going through all 4 seasons. I often tell this in many of my talks. When you sow, the soil stays silent. When you care, the plant stays still. When you wait, the sky grows dark. But those are not signs of failure. They are the natural course of all growth. There was a time I worked on a barley farm. Sowing season was the hardest. Cracked hands, back pain, cold winds that cut the skin. But strangely, no matter how tired the farmers were, they were never impatient. I asked one of them, "Why don't you all check the seeds every day?" He laughed. "If you dig them up every day to check, they'll die, Jim." And that was when I understood, some things only grow in silence. You don't see the roots forming. You don't see the seed cracking. You don't see the soil shifting. But every day, something is quietly changing direction. The problem is, modern people can't stand that silence. They quit right before the sprout breaks through the soil. I used to be like that. I used to quit right before results appeared. And you might be doing the same right now. Another thing I learned from that farmer, no one harvests what they don't care for. People sow dreams, but water their fears. They sow goals, but water procrastination. They sow ideas, but water anxiety. And when harvest season comes, they're surprised their field is full of weeds. Life doesn't give you what you wish for. It gives you what you nurture daily. Ask yourself seriously, today, what are you caring for most, your dream or your fear? And here's a truth every grown-up needs to know. Not every season is beautiful. Some seasons are cold. Some are rainy. Some are full of pests. Some seasons you do everything right and still lose everything. But a new season always comes. The field will be sown again. You will learn something you never understood before. You will grow stronger exactly where you used to be weak. Without winter, no one appreciates spring. Without drought, no one values the rain. Without silence, no one understands the joy of harvest. The core line of this principle, you cannot rush what needs time, and you cannot delay what needs action. When you understand the law of seasons, you live with more peace. You won't demand life to pay you early. You won't be angry when results haven't arrived. You won't blame yourself when you can't yet see the sprout. You'll know you're growing even on the days when nothing seems to be happening. And once you pass through enough seasons, you'll enter another crucial principle, a principle about environment, about the people around you, about the winds and soils that can lift you up or pull you down. Principle 7, environment, and people determine who you become. I used to think I was strong enough to shape my own life. I thought as long as I worked hard, stayed determined, stayed disciplined, that would be enough. But I was wrong. And I realized it in a very simple moment. It was a morning in my small kitchen. A few friends came over. They sat around the table talking about all sorts of things, complaining about work, mocking successful people, blaming the government, the boss, the market. They talked more about fear than hope. More about problems than solutions. More about luck than effort. I sat there listening, and suddenly my mentor's words echoed in my mind. Jim, if you spend time with 5 people, you will become the 6th. I looked around the table, and I understood who I was becoming. People think environment is just the place we live. But really, environment is the emotional air we breathe every day. You can't inhale smoke and expect healthy lungs. You also can't live among pessimistic people and expect a strong spirit. There was a time I worked in a street sales team. That team had 2 types of people. One group always complained, "Customers are so difficult today. The market is down, nobody's buying." The other group was different. They said, "Today is a chance to practice skills. If we don't sell, we learn. Tomorrow we'll try a new approach." The strange thing was, they sold in the same neighborhood, same customers, same product, same prices, same weather, same era, yet their results were worlds apart. I used to spend my time with the first group, and I slowly became like them without noticing. I complained like them. I doubted like them. I avoided challenges like them. I thought I was a victim, just like them. Until one day, I decided to switch groups. And the first thing that changed wasn't my income, it was my mind. It felt like stepping from a dark room into a room with light. Not because the room was prettier, but because my eyes could finally see hope. My mentor once said, "No one is strong enough to avoid influence. Some people just don't realize they're being influenced." I met a man named Walter when I was speaking in California. Walter came from poverty, but his 3 closest friends were successful businessmen. He told me, "Jim, I'm not rich because I'm good. I'm rich because I hung around people who refused to let me live small." That sentence stayed with me. Today, if you look at your own life, you'll see this very clearly. Whose laughter do you copy? Whose words do you repeat? Whose fears do you adopt? Whose beliefs do you mirror? Whose habits do you follow? We are the result of blending. No one is immune to environment. No one grows in the right direction alone. One of my favorite images in nature is the story of the tall coastal pines in Oregon. They stand strong against fierce winds for years, not because their roots are deep, but because their roots intertwine. One tree can't stand, but a forest can. People are the same. We grow stronger not because we're perfect, but because we stand with those who point us in the right direction. So ask yourself honestly, are the people I see every day lifting me up or holding me back? My mentor once taught me a simple but profound lesson. To change your life, sometimes you don't need to change yourself first. Just change who you sit at the table with. The core line of this principle: people don't stay stuck because they lack opportunity. They stay stuck because they stay in the wrong environment too long. And when you start adjusting your environment, something strange happens. Small habits, small disciplines, tiny actions suddenly become easier because you're living among people who see discipline as normal. That leads us to the next principle: small in action, massive in power. Principle 8: small disciplines create big changes. One morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The sky was still dark, the small house quiet. I made a cup of coffee, sat in my old wooden chair, and looked out the window. The strange thing was, there was nothing special about that morning. No big event, no crisis, nothing that could turn my life upside down instantly. But that was the day I understood one of the most important principles. Real change doesn't come from big moments, it comes from small things repeated consistently. When I was young, I tried to fix my life with short bursts of intensity. I worked like crazy for 3 days, then burned out for 7. I set big goals, then quit when I hit small obstacles. I wanted a better life fast, but refused to build the foundation slowly. Until one day, my mentor looked straight at me and said, "Jim, the path to success is not a grand road. It's a small road, but you walk it every day." That sentence left me speechless. I had lived for years like someone trying to sprint in a marathon. And of course, I kept running out of breath. I wanted to be better, but my actions came from emotion, not discipline. One day, my mentor gave me a very simple task. "Jim, read 10 pages a day, just 10. I laughed, thinking it was nothing. But 3 months later, I had finished several books I once thought would take a year. The lesson wasn't in the number of pages, it was in the consistency. A small change knocking on the door every day eventually opens a big door. In Idaho winters, I saw this clearly in nature. When the snow first falls, each flake is insignificant. One flake can't break a roof. One flake can't blanket the ground. One flake is nothing. But millions of flakes falling quietly and consistently transform the entire landscape into a new season. Discipline is like snow. Each small action means little, but the real power is in accumulation. I once worked with a man named Marcus. Every morning he woke up an hour earlier than everyone else on the farm. Not because he had to, not because he liked waking early. He told me, "I do this to remind myself that I control my day, not circumstances." He spent that hour reading, preparing his tools, or simply resetting his mind. A year later, Marcus was promoted to manage a larger team. Not because he was the strongest, but because he was the most reliable. And that reliability came from the tiny things he did every day, even when no one was watching. Small discipline does what talent sometimes cannot. It defeats emotion. It beats procrastination. It gives you value daily, even if only a little. And those little bits of value, repeated again and again, create real transformation. Look at yourself for a moment. Have you ever set a big goal only to forget where you wrote it down? Have you ever promised yourself change only for that promise to disappear after a few days? Have you ever felt deeply determined until your emotions shifted? If yes, you were like me and like most people. But the good news is you don't need to change your whole life. You only need to change one small habit today. 1 page of reading, 5 minutes of exercise, 10 minutes of learning, one task you've been avoiding. You don't need much. You only need repetition. The action question of this principle, today, what small discipline can you start that your future self will thank you for a year from now? The core line I want you to remember for a long time. Small daily discipline will always beat big temporary motivation. And once you build discipline, you enter a tougher challenge. A challenge many people fail. The challenge of emotional endurance. Principle 9, emotional endurance. Keep going even when you're slow, tired, or unseeing results. There was a time in my life when I believed successful people had something I didn't, more intelligence, better luck, better starting points. I saw them go far and thought, they have something special and I don't. But life showed me a truth I couldn't escape. It's not talent that takes people far. It's emotional endurance. I remember my early days going door to door selling. I carried an old bag of brochures, knocking on each door with all the hope I had. But every time the door opened, the answer was no, 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 and no. Some days I knocked on 15 doors, and all 15 rejected me. I walked home late at night, shoulders heavy as stone, heart heavier than that. I sat on my wooden chair and asked myself, maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I don't have what it takes. But then I met another salesman. He wasn't smarter than me, didn't speak better than me, didn't have better connections, but he kept moving forward every day. I asked him, how do you do it? After so many rejections? He smiled and said, Jim, I don't let temporary emotions decide my long-term future. That sentence shined a light into a dark corner of me. The truth is, most people quit not because they can't go on, but because they can't stand the discomfort of going a little farther. We don't collapse because the work is too heavy. We collapse because of the fear in our mind. We don't get exhausted from doing. We get exhausted from thinking before doing. I once saw something interesting in nature. When harsh winter comes, trees don't try to grow new branches or bloom. They only focus on surviving, storing sap deep in the trunk. They stand there quietly, enduring wind, cold, snow, but they don't die. And when spring arrives, the trees that endured best are the ones that bloom the most beautifully. People are the same. We don't always need to be strong, but we do need to stand firm. I had an old friend named Arthur. He worked in insurance. One year he failed again and again. Lost clients, lost money, lost confidence. But there was one thing Arthur didn't lose: the ability to keep moving even when filled with fear. He told me, Jim, every day I give myself one reason not to quit, just one. 3 years later, Arthur became one of the top earners in his region. Not because he was better, but because he learned how to keep going even when his heart didn't want to. Emotional endurance is rarely talked about, but it is the foundation of all achievement. You can have a clear goal. You can have a strong mindset. You can have powerful skill. But if your emotions are weak, one headwind is enough to send you back. Emotional endurance is not being fearless. It's not never being sad. It's not being confident all the time. Emotional endurance is refusing to let those emotions drag you back to your old self. Some days you move fast. Some days you move slow. Some days you can only stand still, but standing still is still better than turning around and running back. Ask yourself, in the past 30 days, how many times did I stop only because I felt tired, not because I was truly out of strength? If you answer honestly, you'll see the mountain you've been building in your own mind. The core line of this principle: emotional swings are normal. Giving up is what kills the future. And when you understand emotional endurance, you'll be ready to step into another principle, the principle that carried me from failure to becoming strong enough to change my life. The principle of service. Principle 10, serve enough people. The fastest path to success. When I was young, I only thought about one thing. How can I make more money? I calculated, I worried, I chased every tiny opportunity. But no matter how hard I tried, life kept slipping through my fingers like wet sand. I made some money, then lost it. I tried to hold on, and it slipped away again. Until one day, my mentor said something that turned my whole thinking upside down. Jim, don't ask how to make more money. Ask how to serve more people. At that moment, I didn't understand. I thought it was just a moral lesson. I needed money, not philosophy. But my mentor just smiled, his eyes both gentle and deep. How much money you make is because of how many people you serve. No more, no less. A while later, I started observing. I watched the successful people around me. A farm owner who served hundreds of families with clean produce. A carpenter who served an entire town with durable furniture. A speaker who inspired thousands. Those who serve few people live sufficiently. Those who serve more people live well. Those who serve a great many become extraordinary. I remember a story from my days in sales. There was a guy on the team named Raymond. He wasn't better at selling than I was. He didn't speak better. He wasn't better looking. He didn't have any special connections, yet he sold 2 or 3 times more than others. I was very curious. One time, I followed him on his route. I realized he did one very small but very different thing. He didn't sell, he helped. He asked customers more than he talked. He listened to understand what they needed. He introduced the product not to close the deal, but to solve their problem. And they could feel that. When we took a break, I asked him, Raymond, how do you sell so well? He answered, Jim, I don't sell products. I serve needs. And the better I serve, the more I get paid. That simple sentence changed my entire career. From that day, I shifted. I stopped chasing money. I started focusing on service. I tried to write better so listeners could understand more deeply. I tried to share more honestly so someone could change their life. When taking on a new job, I asked, who can I help here? Gradually, I received more opportunities, more good relationships, more income. Not because I was smarter, but because I did one thing. I expanded the number of people I could serve. My mentor once said, money is the result. Service is the cause. Don't chase the result. Build the cause. One of the most beautiful images of this principle comes from nature itself. When a bee goes to collect nectar, it doesn't think about making honey. It just does what it does best. Serves flowers, pollinates, carries pollen from one place to another. And through that process, honey naturally forms. The more flowers it serves, the fuller the hive. People are the same. You cannot receive without giving. The more people you help solve problems, the more life gives back what you deserve. Look at the people you admire most. Do they share something in common? They all reach more people than you. They all help more people than you. And they are rewarded according to the level of their impact. The action question of this principle: how many people does your current work serve? And how can you double that number this year? The core line of this principle: if you want to receive more, give more. If you want to be wealthy, serve enough people. And when you understand this principle, you'll be ready to step into a deeper layer, one that has to do with you, yourself, your character, the value you leave behind after you've served enough people. Principle 11, true success, is the legacy you leave behind. There was a period in my life when I thought success was what I achieved. The money I had, the house I bought, the car I dreamed of, the compliments, the admiration, the applause at my talks. I thought that was success. But then something happened that changed the way I saw everything. One afternoon, after a talk in California, a young man in his early 20s came up to me. He stood there a bit nervous, holding his notebook tightly. He said, Mr. Jim, years ago, I was about to drop out of school. I thought I had no future, but I heard one sentence from you, and it saved me. It changed the direction of my life. I looked at him, and the strange thing was, I didn't remember what I had said to him. I didn't remember the talk he referred to. I didn't even remember meeting him. But he remembered every word, every feeling, every moment that I myself hadn't realized was so important. And in that moment, I understood something. Success is not in what you have. Success is in the imprint you leave on someone else's life. What you own will one day belong to someone after you. What you earn will eventually be spent. What you accumulate will fade with time. But what you touch in a person's heart will go with them for a lifetime. Back when I was so poor I didn't have $2 to buy cookies from a little girl, I thought, if I become rich one day, my life will be more meaningful. But I was wrong. Your life doesn't become more meaningful when you become richer. Your life becomes more meaningful when you gain the ability for someone to remember you with gratitude. I've met many wealthy people who were lonely. They built big houses but never built connection. They had money, but no one they had truly made better. They moved fast, but no one walked with them. Once, I had lunch with a big business owner. He said, "It took me 30 years to build this company, but it took 3 seconds to realize I hadn't left anything behind except money." He sat there, eyes tired, hands slightly trembling. What he regretted wasn't what he hadn't yet bought, but the people he hadn't yet helped. My mentor once said, "Jim, a person's value is not in what they accumulate, it's in what they pass on." I realized that true success is when your life makes someone else better. When you leave, and the world, even just a tiny part of it, is a little better because you were here. Maybe it's a timely piece of advice, a kind action, a sincere sharing, an example of resilience, discipline, responsibility. It doesn't have to be big. It just has to be real. It just has to come from the heart. There's an image I always carry when I think about legacy. Near my home, there's an old oak tree. It has stood through many harsh winters and hot summers. It gives shade to travelers, acorns to small animals, and strong wood when people need it. But the most important thing is this: no one remembers it for how tall it stands. They remember it for what it has given. People are like that oak tree. No one is remembered for how much they own. They are remembered for how much they give. The action question of this principle: if tomorrow you were no longer here, who would say they are better because they met you? The core line of this principle: success is what you achieve, but meaning is what you leave behind. And when you understand this, you'll be ready to step into the final principle, the one I believe is the foundation of all long-term change. A simple principle, but one that will determine the rest of your life. Principle 12, maximum responsibility for your own life. One day, I was sitting alone in my family's small living room. That afternoon, the sky was gray, with no sun, no birdsong, no sound except the steady ticking of the wall clock. I looked around the modest room, the old sofa, the worn-out rug, a few items we had struggled to afford. I sat there for quite a while, and in that silence, I suddenly realized something. If my life was not going in the direction I wanted, then no one but me was responsible. Not my boss, not the market, not the economy, not my poor background, not the past, not luck or misfortune. It was me. For years, I had run away from this simple truth. I blamed circumstances, blamed other people, blamed things I couldn't control. But the more I blamed, the weaker I became. The more I avoided, the more I lost the power to change. Until the day I saw myself in the mirror. It wasn't a look of self-criticism. It was a quiet question. "Jim, if not you, then who? If not now, then when?" That day, I understood. Responsibility is freedom. When I took full responsibility, I also took back the power to change the future. I remember a very harsh winter in Idaho. Thick snow, biting winds. Many farmers in the area complained they would lose the crop that year. But I noticed one older man. He didn't complain. He didn't sit around waiting for spring either. He repaired his tools, prepared new seeds, cleaned the barn. He did things others considered useless in that cold. When I asked why, he just smiled and said, "We can't control the winter, but we can decide who we will be when spring comes." That sentence stayed with me for many years, because it is the very spirit of this principle. Responsibility is not self-blame, not carrying everything, not adding more pressure. It is how we reclaim the power over our own life. When you say, "I am responsible," life hands you back the steering wheel you've been letting others hold. The problem is, many people fear responsibility. They think, if I take responsibility, it means it's my fault. But the truth is, if I take responsibility, it means the future is mine. I met a man named Robert when I was about 30. He told me that for 10 years he blamed everything: his wife, his kids, his job, his salary, his country, his past. He said, "Jim, I could explain why my life was bad, but I couldn't change it with those explanations." One day, he decided to stop blaming. He fixed his thinking, fixed his habits, fixed how he spoke, fixed how he worked, not all at once, but bit by bit, bit by bit. And his life changed direction, not overnight, but step by step. Responsibility creates confidence. Responsibility creates initiative. Responsibility creates opportunity. Responsibility turns you from someone being carried along into someone steering their own life. There's a metaphor I really like. Life is like a boat at sea. The wind blows wherever it wants. The waves rise how they wish, but the one steering is always you. If you don't hold the wheel, the boat drifts wherever it wants. If you hold the wheel, the boat goes where you want. The action question of this principle: in your current life, what is one thing you know you need to take responsibility for, but are still postponing? Just one thing. One thing that, if you touch it today, the future will be different. The core line I want you to remember for a long time: when you take 100% responsibility, life gives you back 100% of the power to change. And this is the final principle, the principle that lays the foundation for all 11 others. The principle that decides whether you truly change your life or just listen and then let it pass. We've gone on a long journey together. 12 principles are not for you to memorize, but for you to look back at yourself. And now, as you sit here at the end of this video, I want you to pause for a moment, just a moment. Take a deep breath in, hold it, and release it slowly. There is one question I want you to ask yourself, not with your mind, but with your heart. What will truly change in my life if I apply just one of these principles? You don't need to change your entire life at once. You only need to change one small habit, one small perspective, one small choice. Because it is exactly those small choices, repeated over and over, that will reshape your entire journey. When I was poor, when I was failing, when I was afraid, I thought my life was shut down. But the truth was, the door was never closed. I was just standing so close to the old door that I couldn't see the new ones waiting for me to open. I want you to understand this. Life doesn't change when circumstances change. Life changes when you change. All 12 principles lead back to one point. Who you become matters more than anything you pursue. And if you've listened this far, it means you're ready. Ready to live with intention. Ready to stop complaining. Ready to get back up after long periods of failure. Ready to become someone your life and the people you love can be proud of. Throughout this journey, there were probably moments that touched you. Moments that made you pause. Moments that made you want to look at yourself again. If you feel that way, then you're standing at the edge of a new chapter. You don't need to know exactly how this year will go. You don't need to know how far you'll go. You don't need to know exactly who you'll become. You only need to know one thing. You are not going back to your old version anymore. Hold on to the awareness you feel right now. Hold it for a long time and let it guide you, because you deserve a better life, a clearer future, a stronger self, and a journey where every step you take has meaning. If this video has touched you, leave a "so I know you're still here, still walking with me to the very last minute." Don't hesitate. Just one dot, but it's a commitment you make to yourself. And if you want to continue this journey, go deeper. Understand more lessons that not everyone will tell you. Hit subscribe on the Jim Rohn Treasures channel. This is where every video is created with one purpose: to help you become the person you've always known you could be. Before we end, I want to leave you with a sentence I've carried all my life, the sentence that completely changed how I live, work, love, and grow. Success is not something you pursue. It is something you attract by the person you become. Thank you for being here. Thank you for staying until the end. And thank you for being ready to step into a new chapter. See you in the next video. Your journey is only just beginning.